Hello and welcome to the Pod Like a Pro podcast.
This is a podcast that shares tips, tricks and personal experiences and industry knowledge to help you podcast like the professionals.
I'm Liz.
And I'm Nat.
And we are from Pod and Pen Productions.
And we'd like to acknowledge the Awabakal people whose lands we are recording this episode on.
Today we're talking about evergreen content. Do you create it? And how can evergreen content work for you? That's what we're looking at today, Nat.
Yeah, it's my favourite colour of content, Liz. And the question is, what is evergreen content?
Yeah, so evergreen content is content that stays relevant over time. So it's not something that is going to change quickly. It's not something that will soon be a little bit wrong or outdated. It's going to stay relevant if you're listening today or in a year.
And I think evergreen content is perfect for podcasting because people don't listen to podcasts like they do to traditional broadcast media. They're listening whenever they are. So it's just great to make content that is just going to stay relevant for a really long time and, you know, is going to work for your audience whenever they're listening, if it's tomorrow or if it's in 2 years' time. But when can evergreen content work and when can it not work?
For us old radio people, you know, things got old very quickly. Even within half a day, you'd be like, oh, that's a bit old. That was this morning's news.
It's a bit smelly.
A bit smelly, we would say. But in podcasting, as you're saying, it's really... Evergreen content is actually a really excellent thing to think about. So it works when you're talking about things that stay relatively the same over a period of time. So personal stories can be evergreen content. General ideas, like a lot of the stuff that we talk on this podcast about how to create a podcast stays evergreen for a period of time, but things then could change over time. And if you're working with something that's a little bit more fluid, like politics or news, that is less likely to stay the same and be evergreen content. You can still do it. We're not saying that not doing evergreen content is a bad thing, but this episode is just about looking at ways that you can think about evergreen content and then how you can use that over time as well. And then, like I think, Nat, sometimes we think something's going to stay the same, but then there's a big shake-up in the world. Something happens, and so then you have to revisit that topic again. So if you look at something like maybe AI, the explosion of AI, COVID's a really great example because everything was sort of before COVID, during COVID, and now we're in this sort of post-COVID phase where we're trying to find our way again. But everything, so much changed during COVID that perhaps what you talked about pre-COVID doesn't really make much sense in a post-COVID world.
Yeah, but it's a great opportunity to do more content when there is a change. I think it's a good thing not to be too concerned if your evergreen content turns brown and loses its leaves because it just gives you an opportunity to do more stuff. But I think those universal experiences, those personal stories, they're the things that aren't going to change. They're the things that you can rely on to stay the same for a very long time.
So why do you think evergreen content is a good idea?
Well, I think it's a good idea because it means that you have a long-lasting product. You have long-lasting content. You have content that people can enjoy and relate to for a very, very long time. And it's also content that people can share as well. So because the news agenda is moving so quickly, and particularly these days with digital media and the internet, sometimes the time between something happening and then it changing is very quick. And so that reduces the amount of time that people have to share your content. But if you've got great content about how to do something that isn't going to change, or a personal experience of somebody that's so amazing and relatable that people want to share it, then people are going to easily share that content and get your podcast and your brand out wider and wider. So it's a really important thing to do. It also means that if you want to do series, you don't want to do a weekly podcast like we are, then maybe something that is a nice contained series of 8 or 12 episodes that sits there on the internet and on the podcasting platforms is something that that you're really proud of.
Yeah, I really like the idea that some evergreen content can be a series, one series, so many episodes, maybe it's 3 episodes or 5 or 10 or 12, and it's really highly produced, really beautiful work, and it sits there, and when a client or a customer comes along and says, I want to know more about what you do, you say, great, fantastic, listen to this, because it's perhaps another customer or client's journey. I think this works really well in the health sphere or places where people are feeling uncertain about what's going to happen as they go through that journey with you if you're a business. And so if you have those personal stories that talk about how you go through what you offer, that can really help to alleviate fear and build trust for someone as well. And you've got this beautifully produced series that sits there for anyone whenever they come along, and that can be a really great way to use that evergreen content as well. And for other people, I think for, just generally for you and I making quicker episodes, you can replay that content during times when you're taking a break as well. So it's like, oh, look, it's summer holidays. Here's some stuff that still works now. And you can always then direct potential clients and customers to those episodes as well.
And you can also tie it into something that's happening currently as well, if you want to. So if something happens and you have some evergreen content that speaks to it, or offers a solution to something that comes up as an issue again, you can reshare it and go, well, we spoke about this on the podcast and here it is. It might be helpful for you. But I also like that idea about spending your money wisely. So instead of spending your money on doing many, many series of stuff that's a bit more current, if you have something that's more evergreen and as you were talking about, Liz, more well produced, then you may only need to spend that money once.
Yeah, that's right.
You've got the benefit of it. So Liz, now that we've talked about what evergreen content is and why it's good to have it, how do you make the most out of that evergreen content?
Yeah, so for people who have, multiple series or an ongoing podcast, I would suggest that you go through and look at the episodes that you've already done and what stands up to the test of time. So make a list of those episodes that you think you could reuse, and then think of the ways that you want to reuse them. So do you want to replay them and maybe have a little new intro at the beginning, or even have a whole series of 6 episodes that you're going to replay over a 6-week period, maybe in the summer break or whenever works for you really? Or do you want to look at them and then write blogs? Perhaps you didn't at the time have the opportunity to do all the different bits of marketing that you could do with that evergreen episode. So maybe you could write a blog or write a newsletter or do some more socials. Think of ways that you can plan to make that evergreen content part of your marketing today, so that you're not having to recreate the wheel all the time, because we know that that's exhausting. Also, I would be at this point in time thinking about how you can plan to make evergreen content into the future. We have been talking about planning out your year. This is being recorded in January in 2025. So how can you plan some content so that you can make something that's evergreen, and then how can you reuse it? So if you've got a list, it's a little bit easier to know where to go with that.
And I think one of the things that is really good to do is going back through the content, if you've already made quite a bit, and looking at the content that people were engaged with, where the numbers are higher, where your listen rates are longer, and then you can work out what type of content. You don't want to produce the same content over and over again, but you want to know the things that your listener is interested in and the things that capture them. And so that can be really handy in planning future evergreen content, or working out what content you'd like to maximize. And maybe even you get an idea of maybe some of the topics or things that you've spoken about that you might want to redo that has more impact as well, to make something kind of more vibrant in the color green.
An emerald green, perhaps.
An emerald green, yes. Or maybe even a fluoro green. I think is a really good thing to do. And you just did something, Liz, which is really important with evergreen content as well. is you actually said when we're recording this, which gives context because this is evergreen content, but it's also current content as well. But when you're making that evergreen content, really try not to make it at a point in time. So really try to not reference the time that, the year that you're making it, the time of year you're making it, because you really just want it to be immediate, because it's timeless. So you don't have to put a timestamp on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're using things like tomorrow, next week, next month doesn't work. It doesn't work in podcasting in general. But yeah, definitely if you're looking at replaying things, it's better to be more specific, would you say?
Yeah, I think, you can say that even if you are making content where you are referring to stuff that has happened recently, say you're making a law podcast and there's a judgment that's just been handed down that sets a precedent, instead of saying, last June or whenever it happened, say June 2024.
Yeah. And
so it still is accurate, but it's accurate for a longer period of time, if not forever. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, if you would like to make a podcast like The Professionals, we offer editing and coaching packages. Check out podandpen.com.au to find out more.
And we also offer the Pod Like a Pro podcast program to get you started on your podcasting journey.
Doors to that program are opening in February 2025. See, I didn't say next month.
No, very good.
So if you want to find out more, click the link in the show notes. You'll come away with your intros and outros and your trailer done, and so many tips and tricks, way more than what we share on this podcast. It will be personalized for you, one-on-one stuff. So that if you want your podcast started and you want to sound it good and you want that confidence and that accountability, I'm biased, but I think that's the place to be.
I totally agree. And we can help you plan that evergreen content too in your strategy as part of that course.
We sure can. Until next time, happy listening.